Welcome to the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast, where we equip church leaders and compassionate Christians to serve the hurting with Spirit-led wisdom. I'm your host, Suzanne Burns, author of the book, Rescue, Rebuild, Restore, Compassion That Works. Together, we're going to explore how to rescue body and soul, rebuild spirit and will, and restore lives through the Holy Spirit's power. Because every person deserves to be seen, healed, and loved. Let's dive into today's episode and discover how to live out this calling. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast. I am so glad to have you with us today. I wanted to talk about something really, really important and probably something that most of you have observed, but maybe you haven't necessarily understood it. I want to talk about when the 11-year-old parents the parent, or maybe when the 11-year-old needs to parent the parent. Really what I'm talking about is parenting beyond, parenting after addiction. If you've listened to any of my previous episodes, you probably are already aware that I lead a maternity home, a residential program for mothers in crisis. We do have a non-residential program as well, but we have greater successes with the girls who actually live in the home. We have greater authority, we have greater weight, just the added amount of time that we're able to be with those moms. We see much greater successes in the girls who actually live with us than the ones who just come in for classes or case management. But nevertheless, we'll help anybody who is ready for help. Our primary focus is on mothers who are coming out of addiction, out of high trauma. A lot of times they're coming with criminal charges, coming straight out of jail. And so that's kind of the foundation that they're coming in at, carrying all of this back trauma, back issues. And our mission is to get them from wherever they are to a place of sustainable stability. And of course, that looks different for every person, right? That's a different journey. It's a different outcome. All of it is going to be unique to the actual individual. One of the things that we've seen recently is, well, let me back up just a half step. Our clients tend to follow in waves. The type of client that arrives, we generally get a handful of them in that similar category, and then the tides shift and it becomes a different kind of category. We've just seen that over and over again in the 11 years we've been open. Currently, our typical client is older, which means like early 30s, early mid 30s, and she has older children that she lost custody of some time ago. And then she's also either currently pregnant or has just delivered. And many times here lately, we've had moms who were addicted when they went into labor. And so then baby was born addicted, which means they automatically lose custody of this one. Baby has to go to the NICU for its version of detox. And for those moms who are willing, then we can get them into a detox program for themselves. And then they're eligible to come into our house for kind of the relapse prevention and then recovery maintenance. So it's from this framework that I want to talk about when the children parent the parents, because we see it so regularly, so consistently. So I want to talk about a couple of clients today and an incident that happened this past weekend. And that's kind of the context for which I wanted to talk on this show. So last weekend, we had our church's trunk or treat. And of course, my girls come, they bring their kids, they come, they get candy. For many of them, this is one of the first times in their kind of adult lives that they're doing these kinds of activities with their kids, period, or that they're doing them sober, or that they even have the ability to see their kids on special occasions like Halloween and being able to take their kids to fall festivals and trunk or treats and stuff like that. So anytime we get to bring in the children, the older children, it's a special deal for mom. And which it should be. And so on this particular evening, I'm going to call mom. Side note, I have a hard time keeping track when I give pseudonyms. A lot of times I just share the mom's real names because we have them sign a waiver because we're going to be sharing their information on not only on the podcast or in books and stuff, but on Facebook as they have hit milestones and stuff like that. But because I'm talking predominantly about a minor and I don't want to offend her and I don't want to hurt her feelings, or moms for that matter, I will be giving everybody pseudonyms. But nevertheless, you're going to have to help me remember what the pseudonym is for each client. I'm going to call mom Melissa, and I'm going to call daughter Sarah. I'm going to call her Sarah. Okay, so Melissa, mom, is very excited. She has her 11-year-old who she actually just got full custody of just days ago. And then she's getting her youngest son, the infant, about half the week as we are gradually working towards full reunification. But then she also has a much older daughter who's, 18, 20, something like that, who has a child of her own. And that child is probably 3-ish. What happens? Setting the stage for you. 6.5 minutes in, setting the stage still. Sorry. If you guys still listen, then you know that this is how I roll. You have to understand the backstory to be able to understand the story, right? Okay, so here we go. We're at the church. We have the trunk or treat. I have 3 clients with me, an infant in he was about a 1-year-old, but he's in a stroller. I have Brooke, who doesn't have her kids with her at all. She placed her children for adoption. And I have Melissa and her daughter, not the baby. The baby's already gone back to the foster family for the weekend at this point. And then I have another client who has several children herself, but she is driving separately. So we're a whole big clan everywhere we go. And we have a great time, but also, when it's a trunk or treat, it's, once you've gone through the line, you've gotten your candy, you're kind of done. The big excitement of dress up and doing all that kind of happens before you get there. And then you get your candy and then you're like kind of standing around like, okay, what next? They were pretty well ready to go, which is fine because I was ready to go too. I'm not built for that stuff. I played nice, I had fun, and then I was ready to go home too. And so we're heading to the car, and Melissa's older daughter, the 20-ish year old, had come to the event to also see mom, see half-sister, and hang out for a little bit. Mom, Melissa, goes to the car with them to say goodbye. The daughter, what I call her, Sarah goes with her to give hugs and kisses and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to tell you now that Melissa very obviously looks like she has an addiction history. Older daughter, whose name I didn't ever catch, so I'm not going to bother giving her a pseudonym because I might accidentally guess correctly. She also looks like she has an addiction history, whether she's actively using. I try not to make those guesses, those judgments. There are other people on my staff that are much better at that, but unless they're actively demonstrating their high, I just don't make those judgment calls. She visibly looks like she has an addiction history. Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to make any other assumptions. They all go to the older sister's car. And then they all come to my car I've been helping the other mom and the baby get settled in the car and all that kind of stuff. And the other clients left in the other vehicle. And I'm waiting for mom and daughter, Melissa and Sarah, to come get in the car so we can head home. Melissa comes heading over. She's kind of a fast walker. And Sarah is kind of dragging her feet behind her, but she's also crying. And I can see that as she's getting closer. And my first assumption is that she already misses her family. She misses the baby. She doesn't want to leave. What is the reason for the tears? Well, all of which would be normal childhood responses, right? I dealt with that with my own kids, right? They didn't want to leave. They didn't want to go, but then they didn't want to leave. All those kinds of things. Melissa then tells me that unfortunately, she is also laughing while she says this, that her daughter, Sarah, is upset because she thinks that mom, Melissa, got something, quote, from the older daughter. Melissa keeps saying, of course not. Of course I didn't do that. Of course not. She only does pot and I don't care for pot. I mean, these are direct quotes, y'all. I don't do that. I didn't get anything from her. And then finally she shifts to, do you want to check me? You want to check my bags? Do you want to check my pockets? She's kind of still laughing the whole time. And this is a typical emotional response from this client, that she's a giggler. She just tends to laugh and giggle at about everything, which I'm sure can be hurtful to the daughter, to Sarah, who is feeling very strong about her mom's sobriety, right? She has been the one affected by mom's addiction. She's the one who's been fostered by family members in kinship foster care, not necessarily by strangers, but still in all, not with her mom. And also her mom has regained custody in the past and then lost it again. And Sarah has borne the brunt of all of this at her 11 years, right? My response was, what, Sarah? You are absolutely right. You have every right to feel how you feel, and you have every right to hold your mom accountable, and you have every right to go through her stuff and to make sure that she's telling you the truth. And we proceeded. I went through mom's backpack, and I went through each zipper pouch section by section. And then I showed everything that I was pulling out. I showed it to Sarah, and then I felt in the bottom of each zipper pocket, and then I had Sarah do the same thing. It step by step all the way through the backpack, and then I had her feel around Mama's pants, her pockets, and exactly the same thing. Now, of course, obviously we're not doing a strip down, and we were in the middle of the parking lot there at the church, but who cares? Who cares? Sarah needed this evidence to be able to trust her mom, and mom needed to recognize the damage that Sarah carries, the hurt that Sarah carries because of the past screw-ups. And I'm just going to be real. The past mistakes, the past give-ins. And so, of course, nothing was found, but nevertheless, Sarah she was willing to get in the car at some point, but she's still upset. And so we get in the car, we're driving back to the house, and somebody mentioned about church the next morning. And I said, yes, I'm happy to pick you up. I just need to know how many, so that I need to know, is my husband driving separately? Does he need to come with me to pick up some of the moms in his car, and while I have some of the others in my own? Because we don't have a transport van for the house. We would love to have one, but we don't. And so that was what I was asking. Who all wants to come, so I know that I have enough seats in a single trip? And so then I think it was Melissa said, she just made kind of an offhand comment that the daughter, Sarah, likes coming to our church, my church, but she doesn't like coming to one of my other staff members' churches, who happens to also be my daughter-in-law, because Stevie, my daughter-in-law staff, makes Sarah go to the children's Sunday school class, as opposed to staying with her mom, where she would rather be staying with Melissa. And of course, I personally don't mind that they stay up in big church versus going to children's church or Sunday school or whatever. But smaller churches, I mean, they're excited when they have a new kid to come into the church, to come into Sunday school. And so I also get it when they want to encourage the children to separate from their parents to go to their own designated classes. So I asked Sarah, why do you want to stay with your mom? Why don't you want to go to the children's Sunday school? And Sarah proceeded to tell me, I'm afraid she will leave me. That's the real issue. Sarah has been abandoned by her mom over and over and over again in her 11 years. She knows that her mom has not been, I'm not going to say is not, but has not been in the past trustworthy. She has not been reliable. She has not been dependable. And mom is absolutely very much still fragile in her sobriety. And I cannot say that mom will never go back into active addiction. She is absolutely not fully done yet. She's not fully healed yet. And Sarah's fears are justified. Sarah's fears are valid. Sarah's fears are not healthy. They're not helpful. And all too often, we see this so much, all too often, the fears we feel they become self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Look at it from this perspective. Sarah is so afraid that her mom is going to leave her that she's ultra clingy. She's all up around here in the South, we say up mama's butt. Hopefully you know what that means. She is all up in her business. She wants to be with mom, touching mom, invisible line of sight of mom 24/7. And that is exhausting, and that is stressful. And mom doesn't necessarily know how to handle that, right? Because all she can do is laugh it off and say, I'm better, we're getting there, that's why I'm at Foundation House, that's why I'm doing this. And all she can do is try to assuage Sarah's fears, right? But in Sarah's actions, because of her fears, she can ultimately also be adding the pressure to mom that will ultimately give the doorway for the enemy to come in, to swoop in and to kill, steal, and destroy, which is what he loves to do. It's a really delicate situation to be in for both of them. That's one of the many ways in which Foundation House operates. We work with who's in the house. So we're working with mom, we're still working with mom, but we're also working with Sarah now. And we have been as she would be over, but now she lives there permanently. And so now we have a little bit more opportunity in the evenings after school and on the weekends and stuff to really pour into her, to encourage her, and to really help her keep moving forward herself and to bring healing. But so much of Sarah's healing is dependent, because she's so young, on Melissa and Melissa's healing. And that's a lot of pressure for Melissa. All of our moms always, with few exceptions, and those exceptions are generally for different reasons, but always they want their babies back. They want their kids back, whether they're infants, whether they're bigs. All of our moms want to be mom, want to be a good mom. The issue always arises that they're actually not ready. But what do? There are so few foster families. Foster families get exhausted. Kinship families get exhausted. They start seeing mom getting better and they're ready to be done. Not that they don't love the child, certainly, but that's a lot. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of pressure. It's exhausting, right? So we regularly end up getting into a situation where mom is getting custody back of one or more children, but she's really not ready. And it's kind of, when do we decide to have a baby? There's never a good time. There's always reasons not to. So to a certain degree, she's not ever gonna be ready until she gets into the situation where she has to get ready. So to a certain degree, this is just the cycle. This just is the way it has to happen. Here, catch is kind of the thing. And then we figure out how to carry it. So how do we help Sarah while helping Melissa? First of all, trust can only be built by being trustworthy, right? You meet somebody the very first time, there's a certain amount of trust established. It may be thin, it may be wire thin, but there's a certain amount of trust established. Or they leave completely. If there is zero trust established, then they're going to leave. This is relationship building, right? So trust is established, and then through every successive interaction, trust is either deepened or broken. And when trust is broken, then what happens after that? Because trust does get broken. No one is perfect. No relationship is ever perfect. Trust will always get broken at some point, whether you fly off the handle and yell, or whether you're, running late to pick up, and so there's fear established. Trust can be broken in all sorts of ways. The question is, what happens afterward to begin rebuilding the trust, and how frequently is trust broken versus how frequently is trust established, right? Sometimes we might use the analogy of buckets, right? You have this bucket of trust, and every time you pour out of it, being trust broken, you have to make sure that you're pouring in trustworthiness so that there's enough trust to balance the breaking of trust that just happens by normal happenstance, right? I mean, trust breaking, it can be so small. It can be, I break trust with you sometimes when I go a week without recording a podcast. You get used to hearing my episodes week after week after week, and then I don't do one week. Well, that breaks trust, right? It also can cause loss of viewership. It can cause all of the things, right? But that's the same principle. So some of you, that's not a big deal because the bucket that you and I share has enough trust built into it that you maybe don't even notice that I didn't record a podcast. But other people do notice, and that bucket of trust was so shallow that this then shows them that I am not who they want to follow. I'm not a trustworthy person, or I'm not a reliable channel, right? All of that's perfectly normal, perfectly accepted. And we do this all the time with children or with other people. No one is perfect. No relationships are perfect. The issue comes when now, how does mom become the parent when daughter has had to be the parent for so long? When daughter is the one who is having to check pockets and check bags for drugs and for paraphernalia, when that should rightly be the opposite, right? Mom should be watching out for daughter and making sure that daughter is safe and isn't doing harmful things or getting involved in risky behaviors. We know through our trauma study, through the education in ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, we know that Sarah's trajectory, her natural trajectory without intervention, is to follow in her mama's footsteps. That's the pattern. And that's why scripture talks about generational curses. And this is why Mom Melissa has followed in her parents' footsteps. And there's no reason to assume that Sarah isn't going to also follow in her mom's footsteps without intervention. We have clients whose moms and grandmothers are in active addiction or in domestic violence relationships and alcohol and just all sorts of awful stuff. And when your grandmother is an addict, how much hope do you really have that you can avoid being an addict yourself? It's just a way of life. It's the normal. And because it's normal, it's easily slipped into, it's easily fallen into. And that's the normal anticipated trajectory for someone like Sarah, is to fall into boys and drugs and alcohol far too young, which then makes it that much easier for her to be caught up in that as a lifestyle than the children and the loss of custody and all of that cycle, just exactly like mom has lived, again, without intervention. That's our goal, is to intervene and to make sure that pattern gets arrested in Sarah's life and that she has better options. But that has to include Melissa having better options and offering better options. So we've always said that the best way to care for a child is to care for the mom, and then mom cares for the child. It is counterproductive to focus on the child exclusively. And then, because then eventually they get sent back to mom. That's still mom. That's always going to be mom. And so even if they're in their 20s, they're going to be impacted by mom, as long as she's alive, of course. And so the best way to intervene in the child's future is to intervene in mom. And then mom handles the child. She's got them from till they're grown and adults and married and out of the house, or my kids are all grown and married and I still am mom to them, right? My mom, who's 82, it still mothers me. I need that at 49 years old. I absolutely still need my mama. So there's no reason to think that Sarah and Melissa will be any different. Sarah is always going to see Melissa as her mother, because she is, and she's always going to want her mother to be her mother, to mother her, regardless of their age. So therefore, Melissa's greatest responsibility is to get ready for that, to straighten herself out, her life choices, her decision making, just her mental health. All of that she has to get straightened out so she can be the mother that both Sarah needs and her adult children and her infant. They all need something from mom, and so mom has to be ready to provide that. Again, like I said earlier, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of weight. And that's also why all too often, if there's not enough of a support structure around parents who get custody restored or who come out of addiction to back into custody of their children, then it can set them off into a relapse that it can prove fatal. It can be very, very dangerous for the children, especially depending on their ages, but it can be very damaging to the children, just between the hurt and the confusion, as well as what's being modeled for them. All of that works together to create these patterns that the children just naturally fall into without intentional effort to avoid them. So all of this is kind of the focus of what we've been talking about with mom, but also with Sarah, because she is 11 and she has seen quite a lot. So while we're not going to be talking with her in the same manner that we would talk with her mom, who's an adult and in her 30s, we do want to make sure that Sarah understands enough at her age level, because Sarah ultimately has to make decisions for Sarah. And she can't live her life in fear of what her mama is going to do. At some point, her mom has to be allowed to make her own decisions, whether good or not good. And Sarah cannot allow mom's decisions to destroy Sarah's future, because that absolutely can happen. I've seen it over and over and over again. And you probably have as well. How do you help Sarah? Well, first off, you make sure that mom is getting the help she needs, which in our case, that's all in kind of an all-encompassing program. But also, you help Sarah by helping Sarah recognize her role in all of this, that Sarah is not responsible for whether or not her mom goes back into addiction. Sarah is not at fault, and Sarah has every right to hold mom accountable for what mom does, and to have expectations for mom, and to not let mom off the hook for those expectations. That's fair. Those are valid expectations. She doesn't have unreasonable expectations to expect mom to not be high, not have just gotten some drugs from somebody, and risk Sarah's stability. Sarah just moved back into our home with mom. She just switched schools. It would be incredibly hurtful for mom to now jeopardize all of that, risk sending Sarah back to wherever she was or to a different home, making her move schools again, all of these things. And Sarah is a really, really good kid. She's a good girl, funny and bright, but she also has a lot of energy, which is very normal, very expected for children of trauma. because they're carrying so much confusion, uncertainty, hurt, shame, anger, bitterness, and just this general sense of, I said confusion, but it's just like they're children. They don't have a context. They don't understand what it is that they're living through. And yet they also are mature in some ways that, case in point, the whole point of this video, Sarah was so concerned that her mom was getting drugs that she about had a meltdown until we dealt with the situation, right? And how many other 11-year-olds think that? Focus on that. How many other 11-year-olds even are aware that their parents have thoughts and desires outside of the children, right? Sarah has lived a vastly different life up to this point than many of her peers, especially in the church world. In the school world, maybe not so much. And in certain communities, certain neighborhoods, Sarah's story might not even be all that bad, comparatively speaking. But in most churches, I'm thinking like in Sunday school, in youth group, Sarah's story is not the common one. It's increasing, I agree, but unless you serve an urban population or a very low income population, and that's the majority of your congregation, then you probably don't have many stories like Sarah's in your youth group. You might have one or two, and that can almost be worse because they're the weird ones. They're the problem child. They're the ones with the difficulties, those kinds of things. And we have to be really, really careful in how we address these children so that we don't further their shame, further their sense that they're different, or that they're not going to be accepted, or that they're dirty themselves because of the things that their parents have done. We have to be so careful. Now, certainly not tacitly approving any of their bad behaviors or their rebellion or bitterness, or we're not going to approve of the behaviors. But what we have to do is we have to understand what they're rooted in. And if we can deal with the root, then the behaviors naturally go away. It's just like when you're pulling up weeds out of the garden. If you pull up the whole root, then you don't have to worry about that plant coming back up again. You're addressing the weed by addressing the root. And it takes listening. It takes prayer. It takes trust in the Holy Spirit's timing to address these kinds of things. Because you may not have permission to talk about these things yet. If Sarah were coming into your youth group, if she were she's in the 4th grade, if she were in your children's church, you may not have permission yet by Sarah to talk with Sarah about these things. But you absolutely can love her. You absolutely can encourage her. You absolutely can be praying for her, carrying her name to the throne of God, asking for wisdom, asking for direction, asking for opportunities, asking for trust to be established somewhere, maybe with you, maybe with another leader in your congregation, but somewhere, so that Sarah can begin to get these feelings released so that she can begin to heal. Healing is where we want to take them, Sarah and Melissa both, but safety and trust have to be established before their brains can turn off that survival mode. And it has to be in place for long enough that their brains begin to believe that it's real. An example is in the very early days of our ministry, right? We're 11 years old. I thought, ignorance, naive, I thought that just getting them off of the street and into this safe, stable house where they have food, where they know where they're going to be every night, that was enough to get them out of survival mode. No, that is nowhere close to enough, because they've had stability and then they've had it ripped out. If they've been in foster care, fostering is hard. And I am a huge, huge advocate of foster care, of foster families, because we need so many more, and it is so important. And also I recognize the systemic challenges and how easily children can be pulled from one house to another with virtually no warning, and how all of that instability continues to perpetuate in their futures, right? Just in Sarah's case alone, she's gotten back. She's had custody restored to be with her mom again, and then her mom falls back into addiction. So she's had what she has now, she's had before and lost it. There is no reason for her right now to believe that she won't again lose it, right? That's why she's freaking out over whether or not her mom got drugs from her oldest sister at the trunk or treat. She's had this and she's lost it. So what she has now, she knows is losable, right? It can be lost. And that is not safety. She is and still needs to be in survival mode for a little while longer, because mom has to prove she's trustworthy. Mom has to prove her stability. And mom, quite honestly, may not be able to. So in this particular case, we're certainly praying, we're certainly expecting that mom is going to overcome these things. But all things being equal, all the people in the nation, some who are in this exact situation are not going to be able to prove themselves trustworthy. They are not going to be able to lay down their addiction for the sake of their Sarah. So Sarah's wariness, Sarah's lack of trust in her mom is really important to Sarah's survival. It's important to Sarah's protection. And Sarah's clinginess makes perfect sense and also could be part of the thing that exacerbates the problem, could be the part of the thing that pushes mom over the edge. It works together. So often our actions become the things that we most greatly fear. We become self-fulfilling prophecies. Our actions cause those things to happen that we fear the most, which is why we have to take all this back to Jesus so that he can fix it, because he's the only one who knows how to actually fix the problems, to actually pull these things up by their roots. And he knows when, right? Everybody wants to be out of addiction and done. And, I laid it at the altar, my business with Jesus, I took care of it, and, I'm fixed and I'm never going to crave again. I'm never going to have problems again. I'm never going to be tempted again. And boy, is that not true. Boy, is that not true. You are always going to be addicted. That is not true. You are always going to be tempted back into addiction. I haven't used drugs in 2025, so 25, almost 26 years. I have not used drugs since New Year's Eve of 2000 going into 2001. So 24, almost 25 years. That's it. That's the last day I officially passed. But I still get tempted, mostly cigarettes and alcohol, right? I can drive past a liquor store and be like, oh, I could just pop in there. But I can't. I'm not gonna. But those thoughts go through my mind. That's a temptation. That's an arrow of the enemy trying to derail me. I'm strong enough not to be tempted to the level where I fall. But temptation in and of itself is kind of part and parcel with this whole human experience. So that's one of the biggest things that Melissa, the mother, needs to understand. It is normal for you to continue to be tempted. It is normal for you to continue to have dreams or have memories or just desires of being back in that active addiction, right? There are aspects of addiction that are pleasant, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't keep doing it. The high, the haze, the forgetting, just the not feeling the pain, all of that is a positive, right? I'm not saying it's good, but it's a positive for the drugs, right? That's why they start using in the first place. So Melissa needs to know that that's normal. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean that your salvation didn't take or just whatever. It's normal and expected. You have to learn how to fight, how to not give in. You have to learn different coping mechanisms. You have to learn different ways of addressing your pain or the addiction temptation. But all of that is normal. And Sarah also has to learn that those things are normal, and it doesn't mean that mom is falling back into old ways if she might express that she misses this or that, or she might, who knows. Nevertheless, Sarah also needs to understand that that's a normal part of the process. It is not okay to fall. It's not okay to go back to drugs. We're not going to things that we've already conquered, because to conquer them then a second time or a third time or a 14th time, it gets exponentially harder every single time. You have to fight that same enemy. So let's not do that again. But the temptations that come are normal. And Melissa and Sarah both need to understand that. And then Sarah needs to begin to learn how to trust. And again, Melissa has to be proving her trust so that it's valid. But Sarah has to get to that place where she begins to feel safe and stable. And then from there, she can begin to allow trust and relationship to start building. It's a long, slow process. And the longer the time frame previously really demonstrates how long it's going to take in the healing part, right? This all happened, say Sarah was 1 year old when all of this happened, and then mom gets her act together. That process is still going to take place, but it's going to take place much more quickly for a 1 year old than for someone like Sarah, who's 11, who's been dealing with this for 11 years, right? So it's probable that it'll take 3, 4, 5 years before Sarah really feels like she's established. And that's incredibly scary, because 3, 4, 5 years from now is going to be right there in the heart of her teen years. She's going to be going through puberty. She's going to be discovering boys. Boys will be discovering her. She's going to be discovering opportunities for drugs, for access, because, Lord, it is everywhere nowadays. If you know where to look, you can get drugs absolutely anywhere. Any community, any town, any Walmart, any gas station, anywhere there is another person, you can get drugs if you know what you're doing, if you know where to look. So Sarah has to navigate her healing journey while she's also protecting herself, preventing herself from falling into her mom's old footsteps. And therein lies such risk, because Sarah, we all have free will. And so Sarah has as much free will as Melissa did. And Melissa made her choices and demonstrated those to Sarah. And so now Sarah has to make those same choices. And for good or for ill, she has to have permission to make those same choices, because that's free will. And we don't get to decide for her. Mom doesn't get to decide for her. Only Sarah does. And that's why it's so crucial that safety and trust have been established in advance, so that by the time we get to that point, mom and daughter have a healthy bond where mom's history acts as a protection against Sarah falling into those same patterns, as opposed to mom's active addiction providing the pathway for Sarah to follow in her footsteps, right? I've seen both scenarios. And the way in which you can help is by being that safe place for Sarah, by being that safe place for Melissa, by being encouragements, by being trustworthy yourselves, and please, 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 by carrying them to the feet of Jesus, because there is where healing happens. That is where true life begins. And Melissa can never heal, can never fully heal unless she has a community and unless she has the support of the church body around her while she's getting to know Jesus. It's not possible for someone like Melissa, who's been in it for so long. Now, I mean, if you just, I popped a couple pills, it was like 2 weeks, that's different. And that's minor. And it's not that not legal. I'm just saying that's not the same level of damage that Melissa carries. And so that getting Melissa to the place of true and lasting healing is ultimately the best way to help Sarah heal. But man, when everybody has the opportunity for free will, when everybody can make their own decisions and do what they want to do in the moment, and then you add in an enemy who lives to kill, steal, and destroy, who desires to see families and people ruined, it's challenging out there. It is really challenging out there. But this is what we're here for. This is how we storm the gates of hell. This is how we take back the captives. By building trusting relationships and demonstrating that they are safe with us. And in that, we can see true and lasting change. So I hope this has been helpful. If you want more information, you can visit rescuerebuildrestore.com. You can also download my book of the same name, Rescue, Rebuild, Restore, Compassion That Works. You can find that on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and Audible is in the works. It'll probably be here maybe by Christmas, maybe January. But I hope you've enjoyed this session. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Thank you for joining me on the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast. I pray this episode has equipped you to serve with greater clarity and compassion. If you're ready to go deeper, grab a copy of Rescue, Rebuild, Restore, Compassion That Works on either Amazon or at rescuerebuildrestore.com. And while you're there, you can also join our Rescue, Rebuild, Restore Compassion Collective.